Hey everybody, Jeremy Siskind here. I am the author of the book called Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And I want to talk with you today about one of my favorite approaches to solo jazz piano, which is covered a bit in the book, which is thinking linearly and creating an arrangement out of melodies rather than thinking top down. And I'm going to be using the Charlie Chaplin tune Smile to demonstrate this. Probably a lot of you know this tune. And so a lot of times how we would learn a tune like this is that we would simply see the first chord, B flat major 7, and we'd find a voicing. Next chord, C minor 7, F7. And we might have great accompaniment patterns to play. We might play a ballad. We might even have some nice alterations and put in some little inner lines in there, or some fills in the upper register, and that's all great. But sometimes it feels a little bit blocky. And so what I want to show you is a process by which you can get an arrangement that doesn't come from that kind of lead sheet style of just chord, melody, but instead has kind of an interweaving of all these melodies. So I want to start with kind of an additive process to lines. So before we add anything, the first thing that we want to do is get really solid on the melody. And I know a lot of people are tempted to skip this step, but I implore you, don't skip this step. So first we're just going to play the melody and try to make it as beautiful as possible, thinking about shaping, articulation, thinking about the lyric, and really mastering that melody, making sure you know it super well. Because we're going to be doing some things that are going to take a lot of brain power. So if you don't know that melody extraordinarily well, then it's not going to go great. So, ooh, that sucked. And what I really recommend doing is putting on a timer for longer than you're comfortable with, maybe 45 minutes, and challenge yourself to only play the melody. And even think of how many different ways could I phrase it, could I articulate it? You know, does it work if I go... phrase it a little bit differently? What if I back phrase it, right? There's so many possibilities. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to improvise a counter melody with our left hand. So the right hand's going to play that melody that we've practiced, and we're going to improvise a counter melody. Let me demonstrate, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I'm doing. So what am I doing here? There's not necessarily a pattern or a certain particular piece of advice. It's not strict like a classical counterpoint exercise, but generally the two voices need to be complementary, meaning that when one rests, the other's moving. When one rests or holds, I should say, the other's moving, and then when that one's moving, the other one should be resting or holding. We want to aim for mostly consonant intervals, right? And we want to try to make sure that we're filling out the chords pretty well, so that if we're starting on B flat here, you probably don't want to hang too much around B flat and the other hand. Instead, you want to hit the missing chord tones, the Ds, the Fs, the A flats that are going to fill out that B flat major chord. And notice what it's not. It's not a bass line, and it's not just ornamenting a bass line. It's not going... individual than that. And there's interesting leaps, right? Sometimes when people start doing this, they kind of stick in a really stepwise kind of style for that left hand. So, feel free. It can have sequences. There can be dissonances. And so this is the kind of thing you could spend weeks and months doing, and I've spent quite a bit of my life getting to even that level, which isn't really particularly that impressive. Let me give you a couple of exercises, if just throwing you into it is too much. One is that you can practice improvising playing exactly the same rhythm. So and within that exercise, you can practice moving in your different contrapuntal styles. So, right, you can move parallel, which is probably the easiest thing to do, right? You could just move. Parallel means you're moving the same interval in the same direction. You can move in similar motion, which means that you're moving in the same direction but different intervals, which is kind of fun to play around with, honestly. So you're doing some big, wild skips when the melody's doing steps. And then when you do have a skip, maybe the left hand's just doing a step. Or you can move in contrary motion, right? Which probably is most people's favorite type of motion because you get all these really interesting results and you can play into dissonances a lot. Right, and within contrary motion you could be moving in the same interval, which probably is going to be difficult to pull off because you want to come to some kind of resolution. This one's tricky. And so I don't resolve at the end of every phrase. It's okay to be unresolved. It's okay to be dissonant. Or contrary motion more freely, kind of akin to similar motion, where you're doing different intervals. And it's not always going to be the prettiest thing, but it's okay. Some color in there is good. You can also practice trying never quite to move at the same time. Do you hear that the left hand and right hand, they're never coming together? So that's a nice way of coming together, if that kind of simultaneity freaks you out a little bit. So you can try those things. Other good exercises, you could practice with set rhythmic units in the improvising hand. So it could be that you start with half notes. 1, 2. And then try quarter notes. Try offbeat quarter notes. Try eighth notes. Right, try quarter note triplets. Triplets. I'm just trying this for the first time. I shouldn't be doing this on a video. you can kind of set these parameters like that to challenge yourself. And that can be kind of fun. So I'm sure you can think of a million things to do with two voices. The next thing you want to do is practice with the melody in the left hand. And even if you never plan on playing the melody in the left hand, which a lot of jazz pianists, we might never play the melody in the left hand, it's still great practice because it focuses your ear onto that lower voice. And it really keeps you honest to be able to really control that. Because as you're improvising, there's no standard that you're working against. There's no really truly telling whether you're doing well or not so well. But when you're playing the melody, you got to play the right notes. So spend a lot of time practicing with the melody at the bottom too. Then we're going to move to three voices, right? And this is where it really starts getting tricky. Obviously, I'm not telling anything you don't know if I say that three voices is tough because we only have two hands. So what we have to do, at least at the beginning, is we're going to have two voices practice playing, we're going to practice with one hand playing two voices. And you could do it with the melody. And you can practice with the melody as the lower voice. Now, as you actually then add that third voice, and so right now I'm doing two in the right, one in the left, and of course it could be any combination there. As you add more voices, each voice is going to get a little simpler. Right, we can't juggle three incredibly active things. And as we get to four voices, we really can't juggle four incredibly active things. So don't be, ashamed or don't be resistant to making one of your voices more holding. Or the other solution is to have two of your voices moving in a predictable way so that your brain can kind of group them together. So for example, if I'm moving in parallel, I barely have to think about that. Or even if I'm moving in contrary motion, it's less scary. But if I can't do something where they're moving together, then one's probably going to be holding. And there's no shame in this, if you play your Bach fugues, you'll notice that a lot of times there's kind of this almost call and response between two voices. Right, this is my smile version of a Bach fugue. And then, of course, you want to practice those two voices in your left hand as well. Right, etc. Now, to really master three voices, though, you want to have the ability to pass that middle voice between your right and your left hands. And the way that I'd recommend doing this is playing two voices. So again, I'm going to put two voices in my right hand, and then, but I'm gonna keep my left hand here, and let's set an arbitrary boundary point. I'm gonna say that if my middle voice goes below this D, my left hand's gonna take the note. So. Up, I realize that I'm not keeping that arbitrary boundary point, but for practice, that's pretty good. And then also the same thing when you have the melody at the bottom. So let's keep this D boundary point. Let's see how it goes. It's probably a little bit too low, but it's kind of fun to try. My brain's working hard. When you're practicing this, your brain should be working really hard, and I find that I get really invested in one line and then I forget about the other one. But you want to practice that exchange, and I actually practice. I feel like I can play things pretty well with my thumbs alternating. That's how you know that you can really control that middle voice, whether it is kind of starting in the right hand, creeping in the left hand, starting in the left hand, creeping into the right hand. All right, and then as you kind of really get good at three voices, you want to practice with the melody in each different voice. I've already kind of referenced that, but it could be that it's in the bottom. That up. Let me try again. Each voice isn't as strong as it was when there were just two voices. Sometimes a voice gets a little bit forgotten, it gets helped. And of course, I'm trying to do better and better, but I'm certainly still working on it myself. Four voices, once we get there, presents a lot of opportunity, because you can, we have all this four voice music and we're used to making chords that have a bass, tenor, alto, soprano. So you could play a very traditional chorale. A good exercise to just try to be able to fill in your chords with only four notes and make it sound full. By the way, when I practice this, I like practicing it with only my thumbs and pinkies. And the reason is that once we get to four voices, it's pretty hard to keep track of what each voice is doing. Even with three voices, you heard, it kind of got a little bit messy in there. So with my thumbs and pinkies only, I have one finger per voice. So it makes it a lot easier to keep myself honest and to keep on track. thumbs and pinkies. And I don't recommend really ever playing like that, but as a practice technique to keep track and make sure you only have 4 voices and they're not just like randomly skipping, I think it's really useful. Now, with 4 voices, we have to simplify even further, right? And one good way to do that is to think of them in pairs. And usually when you look at Bach chorales, a lot of times they're moving in parallel and non-adjacent pairs. So the soprano and the tenor will move together, and the alto and the bass will move together. And that's a great thing to practice. And of course, you could practice different pairs. You could pick your own pairs by all means. But I think that's a nice place to start. So watch my right hand pinky and my left hand thumb. These are going to move together. See that? Now I'm going to make these two move together, my left hand pinky and my right hand thumb. So you can see, and it's mainly that they're moving in tenths. You can try some other intervals, but tenths tend to be really nicely spaced. Of course, you could try to have your 2 thumbs moving together, and especially in 6, that tends to be nicely spaced. That's kind of fun. So, yeah, in order to get our brain to work on 4 things, sometimes we have to simplify them to pair 2 of them together. And so far I've only demonstrated parallel, but it could be that you're moving them together in contrary motion. So it could be, right? Glad that you did that practice with those 2 voices so that you know how they can fit together in contrary motion. Your brain's kind of already worked that out. The other thing that you can do is you can think more so about having individual solos or voices pop out. And it's fun that you can even practice in order. You know, I can go bass 1 measure, and then tenor, and then alto, and then bass again, tenor, alto, tenor, alto, bass. And of course it's easier, if we want now, we could use all of our fingers. So here's bass, tenor, did a little pairing there and move some things in parallel. So you can practice that way too. Then, of course, I bet you could already guess that I'm going to encourage you to practice with the melody in each different voice. And it just, again, it trains your ear so well to have to focus on that alto voice, for instance. And also, how do you come up with a voicing? Some motifs from different voices I was going. So you can have all this kind of fun improvising kind of between your different voices. Now, it can be really rewarding to actually almost go through the same process as the first chorus of a tune. You could start, and you can imagine a solo clarinet. And then joined by, let's say, an oboe. And now we have a trio, right? Voices are paired together. You see that the middle voice is being passed back and forth between the hands. Now we're evolving into four voices. And then you could improvise. Third voice. I'm sure somebody could analyze their passing chords. I don't honestly know, because I'm thinking of it more as how do these voices want to move? And notice I played a much less contrapuntal thing. Now I'm thinking really in chords, and it's this nice release after all of that kind of contrapuntal rubber band, happy stretching like movement. You can release that. So, to summarize, it's tough, but there are lots of ways that you can practice improvising a contrapuntal arrangement, an arrangement made up of multiple melodies instead of kind of a top-down solo piano approach. And I would start small. I would start, first of all, just playing the melody and really, truly mastering it. Then I'd play two voices, practice with them both practice with the melody in the right hand, the melody in the left hand. Try to form something that gives a clue with the harmony without just being a bass line or something too obvious. Include expressive leaps, include a lot of personality in your counterline. Practice, playing at the same time, practice each different kind of motion. Parallel motion, similar motion, contrary motion. Notice I'm skipping oblique because it's not that interesting to practice. Right. You don't need to practice that. I'm sure you could do that already. Then add a third voice. And before you add a third voice, practice just two voices in one hand and practice exchanging the middle voice between the right and the left hand. Then you could move to four voices. You could practice with just thumbs and pinky to really control. And you could start with just a very simple chorale. Then you can practice pairs of voices, moving in parallel, moving in contrary motion. And then you can also practice having each voice kind of take its own little solo. And lastly, you can think about forming an arrangement where we start with just one voice and we build. And you can think of it orchestrally. You notice I said clarinet plus oboe, and then I was thinking of a French horn, and then like the cellos and basses maybe entering. And that's a really nice way to kind of organically build an arrangement. So once again, I'd love to plug my book. If you like this, you're gonna love what's in this book. It's called Playing Solo Jazz Piano. The best place to order it is jeremysiskind.com. That's jeremysiskind.com. You can order it from Amazon, but I get to keep less of the money if you do that, and I appreciate you supporting me. So jeremysiskind.com. The book's Playing Solo Jazz Piano. Stay tuned to this channel. Hopefully there will be more instructional videos coming your way. See you later.